Hello everybody and welcome to episode 36 of Beyond Horizons. It's a pretty melancholic day for the space program as we're finally leaving Duna. We arrived here in episode 18, so a whole 18 episodes ago. And in that time we've been down onto the surface of Duna, we've also been to visit Ike, and they've just basically been hanging around the Dunan system collecting lots of valuable science. But yes, now it's time for them to go home, unfortunately. Though I suspect the couples are probably quite excited to come home after 2 years. Well, by the time they get there, 3 years in space, so they're probably missing some gravity and maybe a nice cup of tea and biscuits. But yeah, like I said, it's going to be a while before they get home, so we have plenty of things to be getting on with in the meantime. Like Echo 2 here, which is on its way to Moho. I mentioned this a few episodes ago, but I completely forgot to record the first flyby, so this is actually just after that flyby, when I realised I wasn't recording. We collected a bit of science, not loads, because the whole flyby only lasted about an hour, really. And we don't have enough fuel to get ourselves into orbit, so it's going to probably be a case of doing multiple flybys and using Moho to do gravity assists to get into orbit, and maybe try and get Eve if possible. I had a look into it, there's not any good encounters with Eve really to use it for a gravity assist, so it might just be a very long time before this thing ever gets into orbit round Moho. It is one thing I'd like to have wrapped up before the end of Season 1, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see whether it's feasible, because if it takes like another 10-20 flybys, it might just never happen. We now move on to a project that I had completely forgotten about. I did this weeks and weeks ago, and it's just been sitting in my recordings folder since, so we'll have a look at it now. Those of you who've been watching the series for a while might remember the Hyperion, which is the orbital maintenance SSTO for the space program. But unfortunately it's starting to show its age a little bit. It's still using the Whiplash turbojet engines for the air breathing cycle, so I thought it's time to design a new orbital maintenance SSTO for the modern era, utilising those fancy new dual phase Rapier engines. Say hello to Trident. I called it Trident because of the 3 rudders on the back, but it also has 4 engines, so maybe it's not the best name for it. You can see that those 4 engines are providing ample power, and we are basically bulleting through the atmosphere. Yeah, it's way over-spec'd. This thing basically just punches itself into orbit. I probably over-designed it a little bit, but hey, that's better than under-designing it, I guess. The reason I gave it so much power is because this isn't just going to be going up for, orbital maintenance with some Kerbals and their tools. There is actually a payload on this SSTO. And there's the payload, just a little contract satellite that is destined for the moon. I just figured we might as well give the SSTO some payload capabilities. Nothing too spectacular, but I get a lot of these contracts for, satellites in Kerbin orbit and lunar orbit, so I figured we might as well give it the capabilities to deliver those, because it's a very cheap way to bring these tiny little probes up into orbit. But we don't always have to bring these contract satellites in the cargo bay there. I figure we can actually tailor the payload for whatever the mission needs, so we could put some science bays in there, or I don't know, whatever we need. Maybe some cargo delivery if it's light enough. I don't know. Like I said, we can tailor the mission to whatever is required of it, which hopefully should make this a pretty versatile space plane. Anyway, it's time to bring it back home while the probe heads out to the moon and test this thing's re-entry capabilities. As always, I've gone for a very big wingspan because I like my planes to glide, and it does actually glide very well, which usually is a good thing because I'll always come back with not very much fuel, but in this case I come back with plenty of fuel. We actually have a decent bit of range when we, come up out of re-entry, but I don't really need it. I do some pretty hardcore maneuvers to bring myself onto the Space Center because, as always, I overshot it. I'm really not very good at aiming my space planes, and you'd think that the trajectory mod would help, but it doesn't really, because as the plane comes down, it glides, obviously, so picks up a lot of extra lift, and that extends the range, so where the trajectories mod says it's going to land is usually not really where it's going to land, and I have yet to still figure out the tolerances on that. Anyway, as we finish the return here, I thought I might just quickly mention and talk about how the format of this show is going to change over the next couple months. Just because I've mentioned before, I'm going away for an internship for 2 months starting in July, and I won't have access to my computer, so I won't be able to play any Kerbal Space Program or make any episodes, which I will be very heartbroken about, but I want to get as many episodes made in the time I have before then as possible, so that I can continuously upload even while I'm away. What that means is I'm going to be making my episodes shorter, so I'm thinking around 10 minutes a pop. Just because then I can, you know, make the most out of the gameplay I'm able to capture in this time. So yeah, if you're enjoying the longer episodes, I'm afraid that for the next few months they are going to be a lot shorter, just so that I can make more of them and keep uploads while I'm away. Anyway, here we are returning the space plane, the Trident, back onto the ground. Nice and gently, there was no more problems with it at all. It's actually a really robust space plane, so yeah, this is going to be taking over from the Hyperion for any orbital maintenance that we may need it for. Jumping back to the contract satellite, it's making its way out to the moon, and we have a course correction, just so that we can bring its trajectory in line with the target orbit as set by the contractors. Once we get it into orbit, we will hand it off in quotation marks, which basically means deleting it from the tracking station, because I don't want the simulations, you know, having to calculate the trajectory for yet another vessel that we don't really need. So in the canon, it just means we hand it off to the contractor and we're no longer responsible for it. Yeah, you can see on the alarm clock there that it's still got alarms for all of the course corrections for the Hades project. Yeah, this footage has been sat in my folder for a while, and I had completely forgotten about it, so I thought there's no point just, you know, getting rid of it, even if it's, you know, so far past when it was actually recorded in terms of the timeline of the game. We might as well just have a look at it anyway. But there we are, we've reached the designated orbit, and yeah, got the contract, and there's a nice bit of extra funds for the space program so that we don't go out of business before we finish all of our projects, because that would be pretty sad. Anyway, that's all I've got for today's episode. Yeah, like I said, the episodes are going to be shorter from now on, at least for the summer. Hopefully that means at least one cinematic per episode, maybe more if I can do that. But yeah, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a like and maybe even subscribing to the channel. And if you want to check out other episodes of Beyond Horizons, you can go to the playlist that this video is in. But I've been Moonfish1001, and I will see you in the next video.